They are generated by modern sociologists. They are not traditional, just as the example of Dalit, the word Dalit. If you go to the people, then they'll say, Saab, hum to chamar hai, hum to falane hai. They'll have different names. Now, but now you have generated a whole category of the Dalits. And then there are proselytizing agendas which have Dalits are the oppressed people, they are the people to be reached. Huh? They have not been reached so far, they have not felt the love of Jesus. So, these are very recent developments. Sir.
One question I want to just mention. There is an organization called Dalit Christian Network.
Oh, yes, yes.
Located here in the US, and they are all anti-Hindu.
Yes, yes, this is all based in Denver. Yeah. So, you see these.
There's two of them very good points. I was very happy to be here. First point is the reason most of us we don't have any already written knowledge of our own Shastras because of the very beginning English is imposed upon us. And we start living in this duality of rather a complex where if we speak in Hindi or any of the regional languages, even though we may know the science and maths and whatever we know, we are considered as second class. So that is a fundamental problem. Secondly, the thing about this Varna exists even today. I mean, look at this society or any Western society is very cleanly organized in the same shape. I mean, here, no Shudra will be, so to speak, of, let's say, janitorial facility person. He's not going to be invited to a Christmas party to mingle with the CEO of some big company or household or whatever.
Yeah, it's a hierarchical system.
It's
anywhere.
And it exists everywhere, so we should not be ashamed of it.
Exactly.
The knowledge you provide is very helpful, and I think we should, just like Sadhgupta you was asking, that how should we deal with it, basically by being aware of these little or bigger things, and then just
see,
them.
One has to draw the picture of classical life, in India. It would have certain drawbacks. Nobody is saying that it would not. But you have to make a total picture.
Right.
You see, today what we do is we read the text very selectively, just here and there. And we are actually caught up in a conflict of imposition of certain doctrines generated in Europe and America. For instance, take gender studies. Now, what is gender study? All gender studies in West wants to make women into small men. Inadequate copies of men. Because all that you are talking about is equality. Equality means औरत का आदमी बना दो. She should go and work for the same length of time, the same place. She should drive all the way 4 hours a day, right? Then she should become a CEO. Nobody questions that whole of humanity is living in a sick society where everybody has to drive up and down 3 to 4 hours a day. But people just want equality. So if there are 50 butchers in town, 25 butchers should be women. Right? That's the logic. भाई 25 कसाई औरतें होनी चाहिए और क्वालिटी हो जाएगी. That's how we are going about it. Nobody wants to admit the fact that there are certain excellences, qualities, innate abilities in women which are different from men and vice versa. And one should recognize them and one should allow them to flower in both. and create a social system which is not based upon duplication or replication of roles or equality of roles. So we have this problem, which is essentially a, a problem of bankruptcy of thought in modern consumerist society, which is being imposed upon other civilizations. Yeah.
Just like you mentioned about selective or reading selective text or thoughts, I think one of the things I personally don't know, and I'll be the first one to admit that, what is the organized knowledge? What is the hierarchy? What is the text that initially you started your discourse with? So if there is some organized way one can go about in developing that knowledge, because our schools never taught that organized knowledge.
Yeah, you see, right now, the challenge is this. In India, there have been many attempts to bring in the classical texts into the formal education, let us say from middle school level, college level, PhD, etc. Right? They have failed in spite of 2 terms by the BJP, which proclaims to stand for tradition. And I see very little possibility of it. Attempts are still going on. You can refer to the Hindu Charter of Demands, which is being circulated, and I'll request you all to sign it and to get more signatures, where one of the major demands is that all these texts should be introduced into system of education. But while that does not happen, and that is the real answer, we have to do it at our level of what may be called amateur level or level of individuals or volunteers. But that can be done. And that can be done especially in North America, because people are better off. It can be done in various religious institutes here. You have 900 temples in North America. 9 temples or 19 temples can start holding courses. They have money enough to hold, if let's say in Washington, what do you have, the John Hopkins University? If John Hopkins is teaching a course in Indology for $3,000 for a semester, you can do it for $300 in a temple. But you'll have to pool money in order to bring a real academic to do it. Not just you get somebody and, clothe him in yellow saffron and put him there. No. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. You're mentioning texts, and you began talking about India having more texts than any other place in the world.
More sex? No, art. I said art.
What did you say?
Art.
Art.
Yeah,
Oh,
art.
very different.
Yeah, and different attitude to sex.
Okay, so the question is, and I do know that there are many different texts about Hinduism. For people like me who are just beginning to learn, do you have any suggestion as to the best text to start with, or that if I'm working with interfaith bridge building to try to assuage the kind of understanding that some people have about Hinduism, what would you advise me to recommend to people to be able to read that would be helpful?
Yeah, you see, there are fundamental shastras for different disciplines. So if you want to know about sexuality, the Indian attitude to sexuality, what it has been, including what we may today call gender studies, etc., then it is the Kama Sutra of Vatsyayan. And there are certain other texts also, Anangarang and later texts, but just to start with Vatsyayan is more than enough. And it gives an idea of, we'll talk about that in detail in the afternoon, in the post-lunch session. And similarly, if you want to talk about certain scientific texts, about metal alloys and others, then there are other texts. If you want to talk about how to make houses and temples and big buildings, then there are texts of Vastu Shastra in different parts of.
What about how we behave to each other?
Hmm?
What about how we should live life in this material world? How we should behave to each other?
Now
how
look,
we
these are classical texts, and all classical texts have to be studied so that you take something out of them of use, because you cannot replicate, nor you should try to replicate anything, nor you can, because the world has changed, technology has changed, systems have changed, everything. But what you can do is to create something based upon the principles which were followed. For example, now the Indian system in education was based on learn first, pay later, without a loan. Unlike the American system, which is now being followed very enthusiastically in India, take a loan, pay your tuition, learn, and get and then pay back the loan. You see, you are with the university only for a short time if you can pay the money. The Indian system was that you came to the higher institute of learning, to the Agrahara or to the Ashrama. You did not have to pay at all. You started learning free. You finished your learning, whether it was for 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever period. Then you went back. And then you paid not in terms of a written pledge or calibrated amount, but you paid by supporting that ashram for rest of your life. Somewhere or the other you would be supporting them. And of course, if you were a dishonest person, then you had the freedom to run away with that. The 4 ashramas, look at how Indian society was dedicated to learning. The 4 ashramas, brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. So brahmacharya was when you studied. Grihastha was when you had a profession, you made money, you were out there conquering empires or selling goods or going across the seas and making money through trade, or you were at home if you were a Shudra and manufacturing and selling, right? That is the second stage of life. The third stage is when you retire either to the forest or within your home or precincts, and you are leading a very simple consumptive life along with your wife, and you are meditating, contemplating, discussing, teaching, pursuing knowledge, but not producing wealth. Right? In sannyas, you will only be begging. So out of the 4 ashramas, only one was producing and sustaining the other 3. And what were the other 3 doing? Either learning or teaching. Now, I'm not saying 3/4 of the society were learning or teaching, but a substantial number of people in this society were learning or teaching or producing art or pursuing music or doing some vidya or the other. Sir, I thought you had a question. Yes, please.
The modern post-industrial intellectual Hindu who are often found to be self-critical, apologetic, are not interested in reading or studying any of these books. Is it true?
Of course, it's it hardly goes without. I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, your observation.
So there is implication for society and for culture and civilization. If that is the trend, not only in India but
No, that is no. uh, I cannot talk about the regions of the world other than India because then you see uh, these texts are not part of their tradition. So the civilization of Europe,
Hindu overseas.
well, Hindus overseas are in a very mixed problem in the sense that they have to lead a life of the adopted country and they bring certain habits from the parent country. So they are not a good example of civilization by and large. If we are going to talk of something that will create a momentum, then that would be within the Indian continent. Of course, there will be extremely significant contribution of the diaspora here. But yeah,
I mean, just to add to that, I think what happens that they are Hindu migrants are, or rather Indian migrants are pretty much economic migrants. So by the time they settle down and achieve their dreams, desires, and goals, they are left with very little energy to, or intellectual energy to pour into some.
no, I'll contest that. You know, maybe they cannot start these things again physically, but then I can see very clearly that the Indian Hindus, and I unashamedly use the word Hindus because if you are Muslim from India, then you want to get lost in the cause, you know, in the world ummah, you know, or if you're Christian, then you want to get lost in the Christendom. So it's largely about Hindus and Sikhs who don't want to admit themselves as Hindus, you know, who think that they are half is Muslim. Another big fiction. They haven't read even the Granth Sahib. They have generated, you see, because it's a psychological force. And that psychological force is a palpable reality. And it is going to create a civilizational transformation, not just for themselves, but for America as a whole. America, I'm not repeating Tulsi Gabbard, but America should be blessed to have Hindus. Well, go ahead.
I have one thought and one observation to make. I think we need to, whatever Jawaharlal Nehru did, discovery of India, we need to do a rediscovery of India. And if Darwin was still alive, he would have said survival of the acceptors, not the fittest, because इसको भी दलित बोला वो दलित मान लेता है, and he says I'm a Dalit. So the self-sympathy is killing us. The biggest challenge we have is the continuum is missing.
Is?
Is missing, or I don't see it happening because
No, you're right.
for people like you who have seen a lot of history, the next generation doesn't have either the time nor somebody to tell them what was there before and what we lost. And the education system is not helping.
No,
either.
I agree with you entirely. But then you see, how do civilizations change? They change in spite of this. For instance,
one
yeah,
small thought.
yeah.
So the one thing that is missing at the very grassroots level is, since we have been influenced by culture from outside, we lost touch with the ground reality. So Sthal Puran, right? Wherever districts are, villages are, whatever they used to have at one point of time, people don't know what they had. So people who have seen that, if they can, because people grow older and they are lost, right? They move on the next incarnations, right? So if some exercise is performed to capture what was there before and at some point people can revive that, then the interest towards their own society, interest towards their own place can be brought back up.
I agree totally. And you see, but all this will start by first admitting that we have a great intellectual tradition. You see, when you start from here and you say, well, here is the textual tradition, and it is not a tradition to be ashamed of, but to be proud of, that's where the story begins. Then the Sthal Puran will come, the older classical texts will come. See, take for instance the story of Indian music. Okay? Indian music has been very successful in North America. And no government, no religious organization, nothing promoted it. Huh? I have seen it all with my own eyes, 1965 onwards. Who were the people who brought good Indian music? Ravi Shankar. Ravi Shankar's elder brother Uday Shankar. And a host, Ali Akbar, and a host of other musicians. They came here and they became part of the counterculture movement. You see? And music created a revolution here. There are more records of Indian music concerts made by Americans and Europeans than by Indians in the last, or All India Radio or Doordarshan, because people were touched by it. And it transformed the American pop scene totally.
Yoga.
Well, there are many things, but of course, yoga is a recent phenomena in the last, let us say, 10 years, or I would say yogasana. I don't use the word yoga because yoga is many things. You know, asana pranayam, yama niyam, asana pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. The 8 things are yoga, out of which asana has been taken. But then even asana is a big threat to Christians and Muslims, because just the possibility of somebody going after asana into dharana is a devil's call for them.
So what books, so these books should we obviously have to read them in Sanskrit, but if we have not learned it, are there any good translations?
No, there are several good translations, and when a cultural revolution takes place, then it is not that the bulk of people read it in original. You see, let me give you another example. Let's say from medieval Europe or Renaissance Europe. The first the first Bible was printed by Gutenberg in Latin translation. But then it was King James, 1603 or something, which was read in the whole English-speaking world, and then before that in the German world, in German and French. So they all started reading these texts, the Bible, in their language. Similarly, once you become aware of the significance of the Sanskrit Artha Shastra, Kama Sutra, Manu Smriti, various, then you would read them in all languages which are your languages. But the important thing is to read with curiosity and dedication. Shraddha. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. Who gets knowledge? One who has Shraddha, one who is dedicated. It is dedication. And then you will discover your ways, you will discover your means, you will discover your media, and modern world is quite rich in it, as a matter of fact. But the essential thing is So,
Please
yeah,
continue.
no, go ahead.
I want to change the subject a little bit, so please
Please.
finish your thought.
All right. So this is exactly the momentum which has to be done, that it is worth something. Right now we are at a stage where we are disheartened. हाँ अच्छा तो है ये है, but I don't know, so and so says this, so and so says this. We don't face it with, with courage and with enthusiasm. And you should face it with dispassionate inquiry. There are text is a text, yes.
I just have a comment, like questions which even I face, like you have in your history these four Varnas and they categorize them, and then as Naveen said, and then Clinton gave some examples of such. We all are bombarded here with these kind of questions. We know, I'm just going to talk about myself. I know that arguments exist and Shastras and Purans and Veds and other books are there, and I'm ardent supporter of our the great literature we have. But looks like I'm not aware when I am trying to give my argument.
Yes.
I don't have a two-liner
Exactly.
speech. So are there articles or Indic book club do you plan to have some very precise, crisp answers to these kind of questions which we get? And
Look,
like these are the books.
yes,
or these are
you could possibly discover such things on internet, but I would not recommend. I would recommend that you should just read 20 pages or 50 pages out of a text in translation in a language with which you are comfortable. If you have retained your Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, then in that. If not, then in English. Just go about it, see it for yourself. You see, for instance, the whole of Manusmriti, we have just talked about Varna system because that's the most discussed thing. But this text, what does it begin? It begins with a cosmology. Who created this world and why? Yeah.
So can I comment?
Yeah, please.
I want to change something a little.
Please.
I want to go back to I want to address what is called ground reality in this country. Very recently, a bunch of Americans and Indian Hindus went to Twitter. And the CEO of Twitter has essentially made statements.
I have seen and read all that.
Second, 2 weeks ago there was a hearing in the investment building talking about, these were all lectures were given by Muslims, Indian Christians and so forth, and there was one person who was proposed that all Hindu-related organizations in this country should essentially be banned.
You want to close the
Should be
session?
banned.
Please.
And so what is happening in this country is sort of very roundabout, and there are so many,
And they're very dominant.
and they are creating the narrative. So things that we're talking about, we have a very difficult time even being heard. So the last thing is happening on the 12th of January, and I have information on that, and is just learned about it. There's an organization called USTRI, United States International Religious Freedom Forum, which is funded by the US government. They are holding a hearing on the 12th of January, essentially promoting that anybody who doesn't follow the narrative of these anti-Hindu forces should be banned. This is very serious. And this is going on unabated because majority of Hindus in this country are completely unaware of it, don't care, don't attend, don't make noise, don't write to their politicians or political wishes. And our future in this country is very bleak unless we wake up to this. And this is happening while we are asleep.
I agree totally.
So I would want
I-
to send you the information about the latest version. I get to know these things. And there's an organization called International Religious Freedom, which was created by Donald Trump. And just recently. And they are so anti-Hindu. Anything which is born into like things that we're talking about is labeled as Hindu. And
No, no,
Hindu must be.
no, no, I mean, I have
This is
spent,
what is happening today. Now.
I've spent a
It's not-
lifetime in this whole thing, you know, and I know and I keep following, and I'm a member of uh, the huge list of 900 academics in this country, most professional, called Research in Southeast Asia, RISA, you know, and
As a-
and I take pride that I have withstood all their attacks for last 35 years, since 1995, and whenever I have time, I put a flame, you know, and then, for instance, I asked them several times that you have a category of Buddhism as different from Hinduism, but will you like to point out to me a text like Manusmriti made by Buddhists as separate? If they are separate people, separate thinking, separate manners, separate you know, way of conduct and everything, then they should have created a Smriti for Buddhas. Was it ever created? Can you tell me? Nobody has answered. I keep asking this every 6 months on Riga. You see, but I think the important thing is to create forums where you can have your own positive outreach.
And that's what our dear friend Rajiv Murthy is trying to do.
Rajiv Malhotra is doing through Infinity Foundation. I know very well Rajiv. There is HAF which does it. There are several other individuals who write, and so we have that. But what we need is institutes.